Hello and welcome to Light Talk. This is Stan, and I'm broadcasting today from my state-of-the-art studio in the wintry swamps of Gainesville, Florida.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas.
And this is David in Long Beach, California. And we are the Lumen Brothers. So, on last week's episode, we discussed the fact that Ken Perchuk's son, Theo, happens to have a favorite show. And it just happens to be, guess what show it is, guys?
Light Talk?
With the Lumen Brothers. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. So that kid is adorable.
He is adorable. Matter of fact, we have a video that Ken sent to us with him actually saying, "What's your favorite show?" And he says, "Light Talk, Light Talk." So it was so damn cute that Stan and Steve suggested that we give Theo some swag. However, the idea of mailing a hot gravy-soaked piece of Light Talk pot roast across the country was not appealing to anyone. So instead, we decided to ask Theo to join us and sing lead on the Light Talk theme song. And that's right, you are hearing Theo singing the intro right now underneath us. So Theo,
that's adorable.
It is adorable. And it actually sounds pretty good. Sounds better than me. So anyway, Theo, the Lumen Brothers thank you for being our youngest listener. So Steve, why don't you introduce our listeners to this week's special guest?
Well, we finally managed to wrestle Kevin Lee Allen into doing the show. If our listeners don't know who Kevin Lee Allen is, let me tell you, he's an Emmy award-winning entertainment designer, artist, writer, and producer. He creates for film, theater, television, exhibits, events, fashion, corporate activations, and experiences. He has worked across the United States and on 3 continents. Kevin is a storyteller, a conceptual thinker, a leader, and a communicator who translates visions and ideas into physical realities. He's been called an architect of dreams. Ooh. As an author, Kevin has written 12 books on entertainment design. Vectorworks for entertainment design, entertainment design, scenery, lighting, and sound with Vectorworks Spotlight, and theatrical design and introduction. All are currently in print. As an educator, Kevin has taught or lectured at Carnegie Mellon University, Montclair State University, Rutgers University, and the Broadway Lighting Masterclasses. Kevin Lee Allen attended Montclair State University, where he obtained a degree in theater, and the Lester Polikoff Studio and Forum of Stage Design in New York City. He is noted also for his extraordinary service to the community as a board member or leader serving the arts and business communities. In addition to the Emmy Award, Kevin Lee Allen's designs have been honored with the BDA and Promax Awards for television design. His design sketches are held in private collections and in the permanent collection of the Library of Congress. Kevin Lee Allen is a member of the IATSE United Scenic Artists Local 829. Kevin, did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so. I think that was pretty comprehensive. Thanks.
Well, tell us a little bit about your career.
Like you just said, I'm a set lighting and projection designer. I've been working professionally since I was in college, and I don't really want to talk about when that was.
Join the club.
I work in theater, film, television. I create corporate experiences and brand activations, which part of my philosophy is that there's theater everywhere, and when I can bring that idea out into the general world, I like to. One of our most recent projects was an installation in LA called The Happy Place, where we designed an upside-down room that is named Dancing on the Ceiling. And The Happy Place is an attraction or a diversion. People come, they pay their money, and they wander around, and they make fools of themselves, and they take pictures of themselves doing crazy things, and then they share that on social media. It's a big, it's a huge hit on Instagram. We've also done similar projects for brands like Budweiser. So that's sort of my career in the nutshell. But about 10 years ago, I was asked to adjunct at Montclair State University in New Jersey, where I had attended. And I was specifically asked to teach Vectorworks along with design, rendering, decor, and other topics over the years. But as an adjunct, I became involved with the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. And I had seen a demo in New York of what was then ESP Vision and Vectorworks, and Jeremy Powell of Vectorworks came and did the presentation with AJ, who originally wrote Vision. And I invited them down because I was kind of blown away at the ability to really visualize moving light and rotating gobos and fog and all the things that really make rock and roll rock. And so after the demo, I was chatting with Jeremy, and I talked to him about how I worked and how I taught, and he liked the fact that what I had determined were my best practices and workflow were then and now pretty much in line with how the program is built and how they hope people will work with it. And so he asked if I would do some writing for them. And that was the first of about 10 books that I wrote for them. The first one was about 15 pages, and they worked their way up to over a couple of hundred. Those books were out there, and that led to Focal Press reaching out to me to write the book that has become Vectorworks for Entertainment Design. And
it is. I got it.
I think that's a pretty good textbook.
Yeah. It's on my desk,
it is.
too.
Thank you.
It's on my desk.
My students read it.
Of course, I'm mostly concerned that your students buy it, but reading.
Then they steal it. Yes.
Because every student that buys it, I think I get $5.
That's pretty good.
In turn, after I wrote that book, my editor said, "Well, what else you got?" And so that led me to put together a proposal for theatrical design, an introduction. And while the Vectorworks books are really hands-on and filled with very detailed instruction, do this, do this, do this, do this, now do this, and you'll have whatever it is that I'm trying to get you to make. The entertainment design book, the theatrical design book, is much more philosophical. It's sort of my methodology for analyzing a script, coming up with a design idea, communicating that idea to the other designers and the directors. It's all the things that you would do, experimenting with color, experimenting with line, before you got down to try to making something with Vectorworks.
Kevin, let me ask you one more question before I turn you over to David. We have a lot of younger listeners, high school students, college students. And I think the question they would all like to know is, when did you first realize you could make a living doing this?
That's a little bit hard, but I got my first job designing scenery in summer stock after my freshman year in college. It was a little itty-bitty place. It's still around. It's called the Surflight Theater. At the time, it was tiny. It was maybe 60 seats. It had a tin roof. If it rained, we had to stop the show. And I did that season. I did 14 musical comedies in 14 weeks and took my portfolio to meet John Kenley of the Kenley Players, which at the time was one of the largest summer stock companies in the country. I always made some money. I wasn't making any big money, but I made money, and I was able to save money doing the summer work. It wasn't until I graduated and moved into New York City that I realized I could totally earn a living, first as an assistant designer, secondly, then as a designer. And of course, along the way, I slung a wrench, and I threw paint around, and I cut wood and did all kinds of things to work in the business and network.
That's really cool. You're talking about AJ. We were one of the first people to use Vision, right when he released it years ago.
Oh, wow.
And then I was so happy to see, him finally get together with Vectorworks. And it took several years for them to figure out how does Vision talk with Vectorworks. Because I remember you had to change the fixtures on it. You went from one to the other. It just made no sense. But now it's much more seamless, which is great.
The process is a lot smoother. But even years ago, it was somewhat automated. As long as you had the Vision library, it could do the export. But now, once you send the file to Vision, you can continually update it without having to go and recreate everything.
Yeah, that's great. That's a big time saver. So how did you get started with Vectorworks? How long have you been using it?
A very long time. was probably in the early 90s, and the program was still called MiniCADD at the time.
Right, MiniCADD.
Yeah.
I still have the box, by the way. I
Oh,
saw
wow.
it. It's good.
You could find that at flea markets.
That's right. It's a collector's item. Next to the saltwater dimmer.
The piss pot.
So I have a couple of questions. I had my graduate lighting class today, and I told them that you were going to be on the show today, and they all went, "Oh my God, the guy who wrote the book we're reading? Okay, ask him these questions. We need to know." So I have a few questions that they asked me, and we can make these short. First of all, what's with the none class, and why not get rid of it?
Well, you have to have the none class. You can rename it, and you can make that your medium line weight, or Bob's really favorite class, whatever you want to call it. as long as it's there. There are some things that go looking for the none class. I tend to just leave it in my template file and ignore it. Whereas I have, for example, like an architect, I've renamed the dimension class, which you also have to have, as D-dimension, so that I can keep all of my notes, all of the classes for my kind of note things like D-drawing label or D-center line, ganged together in the class menu. But you have to have it.
Now here's kind of an esoteric question. Can the escape button exit out of a group or editing a symbol?
No.
You said keep it
Not
short.
so esoteric.
That's short. I love it. So
If you're asking me why can't it do that, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I would say that if someone wanted that, and I could certainly see a reason for it, although I have to double check myself because I use the X short key to go back to it. Sometimes the exit button will exit out of a tool and take you back to the selection tool. I just press X to do that. But if anyone has an idea, if you go to forum.vectorworks.net, there are terrific help forums and user forums and conversations, and there is a place for enhancement requests. So you could
That's great.
You could log on, register, and go and send that directly back to the mothership.
Right, that's wonderful. And one final question: why label legends?
Why not?
Well,
Why not?
what are you going to do? You're going to print out, draft a plot, print it out, put it on the drafting table, and then hand letter the channel number around the instrument?
Brilliant. Yeah, really. We used to do that.
I like the label legend tool. It, like any piece of software, we're only talking about Vectorworks. If you wanted me to say this about any of the Adobe products that I use, I'd be happy to go there too. There are things that could use a little love. That might be a tool that could use a little love. Now that there are 3D label legends, it just got some love. But if I want to print a plot that has information for the electrician that I don't really want to look at, or most people don't need to look at, I can have a label legend, and I can have, say, the dimmer turned off. Personally, I like a label legend that's really clean, and that dimmer information would actually be something that the electrician would work out, and is probably going to enter that into the LightWrite file. I have personal philosophy, everything should be really clear and simple and easy to understand. And I think that the more information you put in a label legend, the more challenging it is to read the plot, especially given the more lighting instruments you might have. So I tend to only have the unit number, the channel number, and either the color in gobo if it's a conventional unit. Simple and clean. I'm sure if you guys wanted to tell us what you have in the label legend, it would be different. It would be arranged differently somehow. With the label legend tool, I can create what I need for different positions. I can modify things in the document, not going through the label legend manager, and I can save all of my label legends into a template or stationary file and have them back the next time.
Kevin, this is Steve. Let me ask a follow-up question here. You know, you said you were a late bloomer, but it sounds to me like you're kind of a pioneer. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Vectorworks?
I think that began when I was invited to beta test, and I think that was probably around 2005. And whatever version of Vectorworks that was, I think it was the first one created to run on a Mac with an Intel chip. And I ran out to buy that Mac to try to get to be a beta tester so that I could have the cool toys before anybody else. Before I was a beta tester, I was an active member of the email lists, which are now the web-based forums that I gave the address for before. And I found those to be a really valuable place for learning. You know, they taught me a lot. I still learn a lot on those things. Even when I didn't really know anything, I read the forums, and I sort of in the back of my head, I would go, okay, I don't know what that is, but now I know it. Now I know that it exists. And then, 6 months later, I would need to do something, and, a light bulb would go off because I remembered that, oh, somebody had this problem 6 months ago, or somebody couldn't figure out how to draw this 6 months ago, and at least I had an idea of where to look to figure it out.
Very cool. I think I had the next question for you, Kevin, and I think you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can drill down a little bit. So broadly, what would you, and maybe for students who are just sort of, getting into Vectorworks and really want to produce nice drafting, what would you say are the basic principles of good drafting?
I was taught, and I firmly believe that what we show in sketches or previs is what we need to produce for our clients, directors, producers, and our colleagues. I mean, if I'm designing a set and one of you guys is designing the lighting, what I show you in a rendering and where the walls are going to be are really what we should build. Good, clear, easily understandable drafting is a critical part of that process. If the electrician doesn't know what light to put exactly where, it's likely there will be a design problem, or the producer is going to have to pay to move the light, and that's going to probably involve overtime and probably not make the producer happy with the lighting designer. I also firmly believe, and I learned this when I was working for Peter Wexler many years ago, is that over time, when the drawings are clear, the crew show a lot more care and respect for the finished product. If the crew's frustrated, they're not necessarily going to be able to get where they need to go and not necessarily be able to do their best work. So I started by learning to hand draft, and I made a lot of my living for years as a hand draftsman. I think everyone should learn how to hand draft, although I think the priority should now be learning Vectorworks. The principles of hand drafting and communication are still important. We still need to make and have clearly understandable notes.
Speaking of notes, mm-hmm. I discovered a tool in Vectorworks that I really fell in love with, and it's because I do a lot of work for architects, and I wish there was maybe a better explanation for how to use it. There's some explanation, but the keynoting tool, mm-hmm. I really love that tool.
I use that all the time. And do you have a database of notes that you draw from?
I don't, but I would like to learn. They don't really explain how to use the database, or at least I haven't found it. Maybe it's on the forums, but the reason I love it is because, it used to be when we hand drafted, we put a little note with the beautiful leader line, and I used to make a beautiful squiggly line and a half arrow, and it looked great, and I put the note. But that can clutter up a drawing. So I noticed the architects do keynoting, but they just put a number or a letter next to the item, and then there's an index to the keynotes. And I think that's such a beautiful tool, and I don't see many theater people using it too much. Or maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious about that.
I use the keynote kind of on the front page of my drawing set. Although I then tend to reproduce the notes throughout the drawing because I don't know that everybody's always going to go back to that big set of notes. To go back to the drafting, in terms of hand drafting, there are times when a hard copy of a plot needs to be updated in the theater. So a lighting designer needs to know how to use a field template. And, that sounds really simple, but actually putting the pencil in the temple and getting the line to look halfway decent is a little bit of a challenge. There are also times on a film or an event where a designer might have to scratch in the dirt to indicate where to put the trucks or where to put the sky trackers. It's crude, but that's still hand drafting. A set designer may wind up in a shop somewhere with a pencil and a piece of 1x4 indicating to a carpenter how something needs to be built.
They could be in a Denny's also with a napkin and a pencil showing you the specifications of Stonehenge.
I've never. Well, no drawing
That's
is
the danger.
no drawing is ever really complete without a coffee or a scotch stain on the napkin.
Well, that's what Theron used to say. It was a coffee stain or something like that, right?
Coffee stains and cigarette burns is, I think, what
That's right.
was Theron's signature.
The cigarettes, definitely.
I have an assignment when I teach Vectorworks that I give out that I've hand-drawn notes with my fountain pen, and then I put my drink on it and spilled it, and I give it to the students, and that's what they have to draft from.
I love it. That's great.
It also means they actually have to ask questions because obviously they don't have all of the information. My philosophy has always been, and I'm pretty sure this was one of my college teachers, is that when I finish the drawings, I should be able to, go outside the building, get hit by a bus, and somebody else should be able to finish the design.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a lot
Exactly.
easier for a set designer than for a lighting designer or a sound designer necessarily, but, the idea holds true.
Kevin, I have another student question here that came up, and that is 2D versus 3D. What are your thoughts on that?
When I first started to use the program, there were only really rudimentary 3D capabilities inside of Vectorworks. There were really very few real 3D programs available at that time for a home computer. And I've always thought, if I'm going to use a computer, why shouldn't I do this in 3D? And so that's what I started to do. Now, initially for renderings, when I would draw a set, at least I could get the theater section out of it. I could get sections of details out of it. I couldn't get a rendering because Renderworks didn't exist yet. So what I would do is either export views to Photoshop and paint them, or I would export them to another 3D program and then render them there. That was clunky. Also, if I changed the set design, I had to start over with everything. For me now, Vectorworks gives you a clean work-through from basic ideation to the collaborative process right through to completion. I might still doodle with a pencil and paper, but I can often just start the sketch model in Vectorworks. I'm working on a project right now, and I really just started laying squares out to kind of see what I needed in the space. I need this much square footage for this. I need 4 lecterns. Okay, lectern is 18 inches by 24. I need them here. I need one here. I need to seat 250 people. Grab the seating tool. Basically, just made 4 sections, each with 65 people in it, and move them around so that I could space plan. Little by little, turn that into a model. I'm doing the set, colleague is doing the lighting. So we use project sharing, so he could look at the evolution of the set design, start thinking about where we could put lights. And everything in this particular project is really, it's like a rock and roll show where everybody could, where everything is about where can we put another moving light? What kind of moving light can we put there? We need fog, we need haze. The other idea of the collaboration is that if I'm building the model of the venue and I do that in a project sharing, or we reference a symbol of the model of the theater, I don't have to complete all the detail in that right away, and the lighting designer and the sound designer don't have to, trace over the 2D program. They have access to the same details. It also allows them to continually see a live updated section, just as the set design drawings will regenerate as they change.
Are you using the Vectorworks cloud service to do that?
No, I'm using Dropbox to do that.
Okay.
I use the Vectorworks cloud service sometimes to do things like some offline some renderings, or to create. I forget what the tool's called. It's in 2018. There's a 360 view, export 360 view, so you can literally do kind of like one of those the Facebook 360,
like walk around sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that the Vectorworks cloud has a Dropbox integration, and I haven't gotten into that yet. But I do like the idea, and Autodesk has it as well, and Adobe. These cloud services, I think, make for great collaboration capabilities. It's really cool.
Being able to share information and not being afraid to share your file is really important.
And your process, it's sort of like sometimes young people, well, I'm not finished with it yet. Well, that's not important if you're not finished. We're just sharing the progress with each other. It's a team effort.
Collaboration is about sharing ideas. It doesn't matter from whom on the team the idea comes from. Yep. It just matters that the best idea ends up in the finished product.
Exactly.
And, I really believe that, I have made other people's work better, and I really am sure, and I know that other people have made my work better.
Amen.
So, not being afraid of that is important.
You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers, and this week, Light Talk is sponsored by
the Instalight Drone Company. Have you ever walked into a theater, looked up, and said, "Damn, I wish I had a lighting position there"? Well, no more daydreaming for you. The Instalight Drone Company introduces the new Drone Focus Deluxe.
Drone Focus Deluxe.
Own the ultimate aeronautical lighting accessory that creates lighting positions out of thin air. The Drone Focus Deluxe will fly your lighting fixture anywhere there is unregulated airspace, including over your audience. The Drone Focus Deluxe features insta-variable angle control. It can change altitude in moments, turning your high side light into a shin kicker in seconds.
Hey.
Made with military-quality motors and rotors, the Drone Focus Deluxe is powerful enough to lift an ETC luster, a camera, a wireless DMX node, and a battery. In the case of an unlikely power failure, the Drone Focus Deluxe has an auto-rotation feature that will safely land your fixture in the orchestra pit. The natural cushioning effect of the musicians will soften the landing. Our new Take Control feature adds a whole new level of ground control. It will allow you to manually steer your drone to focus its high-intensity light to highlight a performer or strobe on that obnoxious audience member who just can't stop playing with their iPhone. Checking out Facebook? Not anymore. And for more powerful applications, the Drone Focus Deluxe Mark II will carry a payload of 120 pounds, powerful enough to lift an LED moving light. If any of your audience members have recently taken a shower, the powerful rotors of the Drone Focus Deluxe Mark II will dry their hair in seconds. The Drone Focus Deluxe and the Drone Focus Deluxe Mark II, using our defense budget to create theatrical art.
And now, back to Light Talk. And I have the next question. So you were talking a little bit about RenderWorks, Kevin, and what would you say are the basic principles of rendering in general, and how to prepare your drawing and your textures, your materials, and how to go about that?
Keep the overhead low. Computers are fast, RenderWorks is fast, Vectorworks is fast, but nothing is ever fast enough.
That's for sure.
The first thing is to decide what to model and how best to model the details, and then use classes to determine what's seen and where it's seen. So I'm working right now on with 829 to create a schematic design for a more ergonomic tech table. None of us have the backs or wrists to sit through the conditions we experience in the theater. So in my model, I have all kinds of details like bolts, nuts, washers, wing nuts. They're great to explain the concept of something that has to come apart, go back together, and fit into place, angle, adjust, and slide in and out. So that's great. If it's a stage prop, if it's a custom lighting fixture, I would include those on the mechanical drawings. But in the rendered views, I would probably turn all those details off. Sign them in their own class, get rid of them so that the computer isn't having to think about all that complex geometry.
Right.
I do a lot of custom textures for scenery. So if I'm creating a 22-foot by 50-foot stage backdrop, I might use Photoshop to create the image or to scan a painting. If I just do that and I'm going to give it to a scenic, that might be a 50 megabyte file. If I'm going to print that backdrop, it might be more than 10 gigabytes. I'm not going to use that 10 gigabyte file in Vectorworks. Everybody should have a little bit of knowledge about printing in DPI, and that's all in my book. But if I'm going to put that backdrop on stage, I'll create a Photoshop or a JPEG file at the final dimensions, because that helps me keep it kind of straight in my mind how that's going to map onto an object. But I use a really low DPI. So if I have a 22-foot by 50-foot texture, it might only be 5 DPI. And I generally try to keep those files under 2 megabyte so that I'm not clogging Vectorworks with a lot of huge textures. My thought is I'm probably going to output that image either on a tabloid size page or in a larger set of drawings, but probably no bigger than a tabloid size page. If I need to make a poster of that rendering, I might increase the size of my textures for the rendering output, because I was going to print it at 30 inches by 40 inches. Lights add geometry. Lights complicate things.
Right.
Whether they're spotlight lighting devices or Vectorworks light objects, I use as few as possible in the rendering to make it work. And I'm talking about using RenderWorks, not Vision. And I try to avoid the point light object, because all they do is add math. If you think of a point light, it's basically a light bulb in the middle of a room, and the rays of light are bouncing off of everything and attacking everything. The more you add, the more math you're adding, the longer your rendering time. And keep the polygon count low.
Okay, great. So why don't you tell us a little bit how Vectorworks works with previs? I mean, do you use it to previs?
I do. I mean, I start as I'm a huge fan of still images rather than video. I think I'm still, shell shocked from what video was 20 years ago on a computer. But I think stills are a great place to start. And I think, when you take a show into Vision and can really literally show the whole show to the director offline, I think that's phenomenal. But I also think stills are a great way to process your ideation. So, before starting a light plot and before putting, 600 units down and turning them on and trying to look at it, I use the Vectorworks light objects. They're in the visualization tool set. And, I just throw a couple of spotlights up there. They're not necessarily perfectly focused, but if I'm lighting the set and I want to see how the colors I'm going to use, I can pick, I can use any RGB value, I can use any hexadecimal value, I can pick any stock gel color. They're in the Vectorworks libraries. I can put it into that object and put it on the set and light the set and take a look at it. I can also render something. This is the only place I would use OpenGL, is I could do those renderings and change the colors for myself using OpenGL to look at it, make quick changes, get it to a point, either fast RenderWorks, final RenderWorks, or a RenderWorks style, send it out, send it to the director, and discover that the director doesn't like yellow. And then I can fix that, whether it's the yellow in the set or the yellow in the lights. As a producer, there's huge amounts of money wasted in tech, because there are hours and hours and hours where we're setting light levels and working on things in the theater that the carpenters could be working, the actors could be working. On Broadway, that's just a massive amount of crew time, when really you could put the lighting designer and a programmer and an assistant in a room with a 50-gallon drum of coffee and let them previs the show.
I have a follow-up on that, because years ago, I've been a big previs advocate for probably 15, 16 years, and I remember some of the responses I got from the Broadway community was, I don't want to light the show twice. I want to come in once and light it once. And I kind of wonder, has that attitude shifted? Are people doing previs work now for commercial theater on Broadway?
I don't know if they're doing it for commercial theater on Broadway. I know they're certainly certainly rock and roll has done it for a long time.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Opera does it. Fashion does it. My colleague who first introduced me to vision was like, look, I can go sit in a room. I can take, I can pre-program the show. I can take it into the theater, or I could bring the director into the studio, show him or her the animation. We can make a few adjustments. I take the USB drive, I take it to the theater, I put it in the board, and then I spend an hour touching it up.
Yep, I've done it myself. I've had students do it. I think it's fantastic, and I'd like to see it adopted even more broadly.
I would too.
Yeah, for some reason it's not. I mean, that's what we did at the Royal Opera House. We basically lit the show in previs over a 3-day period, using Vision, by the way. It's like 5 years ago. And then we only had like maybe a couple of hours of just lighting time, pure lighting time in the theater. And then we just cleaned it up over the rehearsals.
We even achieved it in academia. We did Chicago. The set was done in Vectorworks. The lighting student took that 2D set, put it into a visualizing software, built it up in 3D, did his light plot in Vectorworks, but then duplicated it pretty quickly in a visualizer, plugged in the board, cued the whole show. We all didn't know how it was going to work. Took that jump drive, like you said, down into the theater, put it in the board, and started stepping through the cues. And we were like, this was an automation, which was pre-focused. And we were amazed at how close it was. And you did have to still touch it, but it was really...
Well, it's not that close because you're talking about 2D versus 3D. And
we did it in 3D.
No, but you're watching it in 2D.
Yes,
you did it in
true.
3D, but you're looking at a 2D image being projected somewhere. When this will all change is when they perfect virtual reality into these visualization programs, so you actually see it in 3D.
Well, that's when we can have the lighting console that's not really a touch screen, but in the air, and you can just put your touch the spot on the stage where you want all the moving lights to focus.
Right. Well, that's Drone Focus Deluxe. We already have that. but no, seriously, one of our listeners has asked us to talk about virtual reality. We were talking about it about 20 episodes ago as a joke, But wouldn't it be cool for the first visualizing program, to actually have a VR component?
I did see a young lady who works for a theater consulting firm in New York showed us a prototype that they had developed in their office, and basically you put on this goggle and then you can basically push a button and put yourself in any seat in the theater, and you would be placed in that seat in 3D virtual reality. And that's how they were testing for sight lines from every single seat.
Yeah, that they have. I know that, but I don't think they have the horsepower yet to actually see a light show in 3D.
No, that's something else. Right.
That's definitely a horsepower thing and a polygon thing. I tell people to check sight lines with a camera, with the camera object.
That works.
You could still draw the lines the way that we were taught in hand drafting, but if you put a camera there, you can see backstage, or not if you've done it right.
On the question of horsepower, one thing that we're looking at doing in our computer lab is to turn it into a render farm, so that you've got the computing power of 12 or 14 or 50 computers in your building, that when they're not being used, it's a way to harness that processing power. And that may be the way in which we get to that point, David.
That could possibly be it. One of the things that I do is I'm a guest scholar at Carnegie Mellon University. And when I go out, I get to talk to the Department of Drama, but it's the Entertainment Technology Center that brings me out.
Yeah.
And they are essentially the Graduate School of Game Design.
Excellent.
But
those are the people.
But it's much more than just gaming, and they have people that have all kinds of diverse interests.
Right.
And I know there's a VR project that I'm supposed to talk to some students like next week about. But last semester I saw something that was a city planning tool. Mm-hmm. So they kind of built up a couple of neighborhoods and modeled them modeled around them in really low poly, simple cubes. But then you could walk through the neighborhood, and if somebody wanted to put a high rise into the neighborhood, they could turn on a high rise, and you could see how the high rise would affect the streetscape, as
Sure, and
opposed to, and it was a
sunlight.
pretty sunlight. It was a relatively, it was a 3, 4, 5-story kind of neighborhood. So you could see how that would affect everybody around it. You could see what it would be like if you put in 50 high rises.
Wow, that's cool.
Was it in a VR format or projected on a flat surface?
VR format. Right. So you had to put the goggles on, and you navigated your way through with the with a controller that appeared. You had a hand controller, like a gaming controller, and what you did with it kind of appeared on the screen in space. But there was kind of no lighting, and there was minimal atmosphere. Although they could show you a sunny day, a cloudy day, and maybe some semblance of rain. But yeah, you're talking about a lot of horsepower.
Yeah, but the day is going to come, and it'll probably come in our lifetime, and I think that's really going to change everything.
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt. And
I just saw something in Japan. At SMU we have a gaming center also called Guild Hall. And I was in Japan, and they said, "Let me take you. We're going to show you a new 3D game." And I thought, yeah, 3D game. So they take me into the studio. There's a computer setting there, and they say, "Sit down." So I sit down, and they turn on a NASCAR racing game. And in front of me on the table is a 3D NASCAR. I'm not wearing goggles. I feel like that Mel Brooks movie, I think, Frankenstein, where you're grasping at the notes in the air. And it's right there in front of me. And I've got a virtual wheel.
Oh, wow.
And that wheel allows me to turn that car.
Was it holographic, Steve?
It was holographic.
Real hologram,
it was absolutely
not
amazing.
Just a Pepper's Ghost?
No, it wasn't a Pepper's Ghost. And the discussion they were having, oddly enough, was that probably it had no future as a game, but it had a future as a sales tool. So you could walk through a shopping mall in Japan, and when you walked past a store, a little clerk would pop up in the hallway in front of you because they were reading off of your credit card that you had gotten from the store. So it would say, "Hey, Steve, we got those new blue jeans you like so much." And she or he would lead you into the store, and another hologram would pick you up and walk you to a real sales clerk.
Let me throw this one at you, since we're all sharing this kind of story. So we have, like the Carnegie Mellon Center, and what you have there at SMU, Steve. We have a Digital Worlds Institute, and one of the most fascinating things they've been doing recently with this VR. Let's say, and they're doing this actually. So let's say you are going in to have back surgery. What they are doing is they are 3D MRIing your back, and then they are putting that spine into a virtual body, putting the surgeons in the goggles, and then they are literally rehearsing the surgery on your virtual body to get it into their muscle memory before they go into surgery. So because every back is different, everybody's anatomy is not perfect, they're literally taking your anatomy, digitizing it, putting it into VR, and letting the surgeons then practice the surgery in advance. How remarkable is that?
That is very cool. Now, and just to kind of bring it back to our world.
No. This is much more interesting than you're talking about before.
No, but I mean,
you guys are working at real universities. My university's still trying to figure out the abacus. I mean, really, guys. Oh man. Okay. Back to lighting.
Back to our
no.
Back to light
just
talk.
I mean,
Back
just
to
on
light
the same theory. As long as you can export a 3D model. And I don't know if I've touched on what, BIM, which I'm sure you guys know.
Building information management, sure.
Yeah, as long as I'm waiting for the day, and I think actually this software exists, is you can export the model to a sound program, and as long as there's BIM information on what the materials are you're using, So if if the orchestra seating has a certain amount of steel in it, it has a certain amount of cushion. If the walls are whatever wood they are angled, whatever, you can play back the sound, so it will sound like it's there, as well as your headphones or earbuds can do that. Now think about the Apple AR kit that's in, at least now I think it's just in iOS. But when you think about that kind of technology in virtual reality, someday soon, they're really going to be able to hear the soundscape for a show offline, really the way that it's going to sound in the theater, the way that we're talking about that we can visualize lighting.
Well, Kevin, what real advice do you have for anyone young starting out in this business?
Run away now.
Run away!
But I mean, seriously, I mean, I think we all do this because we love it. We do this because we have found ways to, earn a living and, put a roof over our head and, heat, food, air conditioning, clothes, all that stuff. But it takes doing the work. When I was first working as an assistant back in the dark ages, I practiced my hand drafting and my lettering every night. I might have been watching television, but I was watching television at my drafting table and practicing my skills. I built small model pieces. I learned to be clean, accurate, and fast, and that increased my value as an assistant. I also learned to make a wicked cup of coffee. And I don't know if I talked about this before or not, but some of these things are just, when you get out of school, what is it that you have to sell? What is it that is going to make you valuable to somebody else? Mm-hmm. And obviously being a brilliant designer is one of them, but it's odds are you're not probably going to go to Broadway the day you get out of school. Odds are you're probably going to be someone's assistant. So, are you a master at Lightright? Can you work Vision? How many boards can you program that you can use with Vision, or how many of the soft apps for the various languages can you use so you can go and take some designer's notes and the plot and go sit in a dark room and rough out what that designer sees? How good are you as a vector worker? I also always tell people to, you're probably going to need a day job. Don't sling hash. Don't wait tables unless you really have to, but sling a wrench. If you're slinging a wrench, and if you're in, cities that have an entertainment industry, there'll be an opportunity, even if you're a dancer, to sling a wrench, hang some lights, and network with the other people there. They'll all be people in your circumstances. These are all networking opportunities. So, if you're a set designer and you're hanging lights and you're talking to the guy next to you or the woman next to you who happens to be a lighting designer, that may be the contact to the next director who's going to hire you. There are also lots of non-traditional places to look for that kind of work: weddings, parties. Figure out what your weaknesses are. First, admit that you have weaknesses. That's really hard for any of us to do, particularly when you're very young. And work on them, fix them, correct them. Interview as much as you can. Interviews are great experiences to learn about how you can, convince people to hire you, sell yourself, what you need to do. Oh, I didn't dress right that time. Didn't get the job. I'll dress, a little nicer next time. Networking, I can't stress networking enough. If you're in a place and everybody goes to have a drink somewhere after the call and you're not on the call, well, go there, hang out, don't get wasted, just talk to people, make them aware of you and what you can do. Read plays, see shows, go to the movies. The texts are the common language that we all make reference to. You may not have the answer to the magic at the end of Blythe Spirit, but you ought to know what the moment is that I'm talking about when I said that. And if you don't, you should go read the play. Find out whose work you like. If you're in New York, go to a Broadway show. If you're a lighting designer and you like the lighting, look at the poster, look at the program, and call that person. Go meet with them, have a cup of coffee, interview with them, ask them for advice. Odds are they'll help you. And learn to make a great cup of coffee.
Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us today.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Kevin, it's great having you here, man. It was great. Well, that Hammond organ solo you hear in the background tells us that once again you spent a precious hour of your life listening to Light Talk. Look for the next episode of Light Talk here on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Spotify, or the Light Talk Facebook group page. And while you are there, post your comments and questions, and be sure to subscribe to Light Talk.
Regarding the accuracy of our statements and opinions, no guarantees are offered.
In other words, what Steve is saying, don't burn down your theater.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And don't forget to keep those questions and comments coming. You can email us at David, Stan, or Steve at lighttalk.org.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss how to increase your client network, who the hell is Kliegel, what to do when you hit a design wall, can you find a great LED moving head in the 2,000 to 4,000 range, and we even discuss the Olympics.
All that and a new sponsor.
We'll see you next week. Same time, same channel.
Bye-bye, everybody.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Sing it, Theo.
Light Talk.